The main selling point of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is of course the fact that everyone is here. Every fighter from Super Smash Bros. History is on the roster, which of course made a ton of people, including myself, very happy. Okay, they could have cut Olimar, he's annoying. Alongside Smash Ultimate's large roster of characters, it also has a massive stage list. There are 115 stages, which goes without saying is by far the biggest in the series' history. However, unlike the character roster, this stage list does not contain every stage from Smash history. In fact, there are 15 stages from previous games in the series that have not returned for one reason or another. Today, I want to take a look at all 15 of these stages and explain why they were cut or why I think they were cut. I'm also going to throw each of these stages onto a tier list, which ranks them based on how much I actually want them back. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right into our first stage. First, we got the stages from Smash Bros. 64. Now, despite there only being 9 total stages, there are actually 2 from here that got cut. First off, we have Planet Zebes, which acted as the Metroid stage for this game. This consists of 1 large hilly platform and 3 other platforms placed above it. There's also a moving platform to the right of the stage that moves up and down. The main gimmick of Planet Zebes, though, is that it occasionally dips into the ocean of acid below it, which will damage players if they come in contact with it. Now, if what I'm saying sounds somewhat familiar to a stage that is in Ultimate, then you are likely thinking of the stage Brinstar, which was added in Super Smash Bros. Melee and has a very similar gimmick. Brinstar, however, is a bit more special as it can actually be broken apart by hitting certain portions of the stage. For that reason, Planet Zebes was essentially replaced by Brinstar from Melee onwards, which is why it hasn't come back for Ultimate. This will be a pretty common theme in this video. It's not the only reason stages were cut, but it's definitely the most common reason. Personally, I think that reasoning is pretty fair, so I'm not too interested in this stage making a comeback. I'll place it in C tier in terms of how much I want it, since it is different enough to make it not a complete waste, though I'm perfectly fine with it never returning again. Our second stage comes from the Star Fox series, Sector Z. This takes place on the Great Fox, flying through the titular Sector Z. Occasionally during the fight, certain things will come flying by to disrupt it, even including R-Wings. Now, if you somehow haven't figured out why this stage has never come back, maybe this will help you. Yeah, just like Planet Zebes, Sector Z got entirely replaced by a stage added in Melee, being Corneria. The layouts are pretty much identical as they're based on the same ship, just in different locations. Considering Corneria is a fan favorite stage, I highly doubt that Sector Z will ever make a comeback in the future. That's not to say I would be against it though, the background is pretty unique, so I think it would make for a really fun Omega or Battlefield stage. For that reason, I'll let it squeeze into C tier, but only barely. Now, normally that would be the end of Smash 64, however my Metal Mario amiibo has threatened my life about 3 times now, so I think it's better to be safe than sorry and do a little bonus segment on the single-player exclusive Metal Mario stage. Now, for this video, I'm only going to be talking about actual versus mode stages, but I actually like this stage too, so whatever, we're talking about 16 stages now. The official name for this stage is Meta Crystal, and it's where the Metal Mario fight takes place in classic mode. It's loosely based on the Cavern of the Metal Cap stage in Mario 64, which makes perfect sense, as that's where you first unlock the Metal Cap power-up. The layout consists of 1 long platform with a bump at the right, and another platform near the center. I really like this layout. Sure, slopes can be somewhat annoying, but this honestly isn't that far away from being a tournament legal stage. Simpler stages like this are my personal favorite to play on, and since there's no other stage like it in Ultimate, I would love for it to make a return. Add on that Mario 64 is one of my favorite games ever made, and this gets to land pretty comfortably in A tier. Obviously though, this was never included since it was just meant to be a boss stage. However, I don't think it's impossible for it to make a comeback in a future entry. A lot of people are quite big fans of this stage, so I could see them eventually adding this as a little surprise sometime in the future. Alright, now it's time to look at the stages from Super Smash Bros. Melee. With the increased stage roster of 29 comes the increase of cut stages as well, with a total of 5. Our first stage comes from the Mario series, being Mushroom Kingdom. Isn't Mushroom Kingdom already a stage in Ultimate? Well, actually nerds, while they share the same name, the Mushroom Kingdom stage in Ultimate is completely different from the one in Melee. Kind of an embarrassing mistake for you guys, honestly. This stage is also based on the classic Super Mario Bros. Art style, though there are several layout differences between Mushroom Kingdom 64 and Melee. The Melee variant is comprised of 3 main platforms instead of 2, and the balancing platform is split up by the middle chunk of the land. Unlike the bricks in Mushroom Kingdom 64, in Melee they can actually be broken. That does come with the unfortunate loss of other hazards like the warp pipes from the first variant. So between the two, I'm personally a much bigger fan of the one from 64, so I'm happy it was the one that got chosen over the Melee version. This is sort of the inverse of what we saw with Planet Zebes and Sector Z. Instead of the Melee stage replacing the old one, the original replaced the Melee one. As for if I ever want it back, I honestly don't really. This is gonna go into F tier. Not only is it a worse version of a stage we already have, but it also doesn't have a unique aesthetic, meaning its Omega and Battlefield forms would basically just be copies of what we already have with Mushroom Kingdom. I do really like Mushroom Kingdom's aesthetic, I just think it'd be redundant to have another stage with it. The next stage comes from the F series F-Zero franchise, being Mute City. This is our biggest stage so far, as it's the first to actually move to several different locations during the fight. As the name states, this takes place on Mute City, and you have to move along the track, very similar to other stages like Mario Circuit, and of course, Port Town Aero Dive. Just like both of these stages too, several races will come zooming through the fight, which will be able to damage players if they run them over. Players will also get damaged by the track itself if they touch it while the platform is transitioning them. Now, unlike the other versus stages we've talked about so far, this doesn't really have an exact replacement. Sure, Port Town Aero Dive is very similar mechanic-wise, but the layouts at each of the sections are different, as they are two different tracks. Still though, I think it's safe to assume that the mechanical similarities are what ended up getting Mute City cut from future entries. Since it is fairly different though, I think it deserves to be a B tier on the want list. Not necessarily something I'm begging for, but I'd appreciate it returning. One interesting detail about this stage though has to do with the other Mute City stage in Smash, Mute City SNES. Actually, take a look at that name again. When this was originally added as a stage of Smash 3DS, it was just referred to as Mute City. Ultimate added the SNES part after its name, which makes me wonder if they were planning on adding back the Melee Mute City before eventually scrapping it. As far as I could tell, there's no real evidence behind that, but I thought it was kind of interesting to point out. Cut Melee stage number 3 is the original Ice Climber stage, Icicle Mountain. First off, thank god this was cut, this stage sucks. This is a dreaded auto-scrolling stage, which I'm sure most people can agree are just not that fun to fight on. Instead of scrolling horizontally though, this one uniquely scrolls upwards. This makes sense as it's meant to represent climbing a mountain, but it also makes it horrible to fight on. This vertical scroll may have also been the reason it ended up not making it into Ultimate as well. Unlike every other versus stage we've talked about so far, this one doesn't have any sort of equivalent in Ultimate. The only Ice Climber stage there is Summit, which plays very differently, so I think it's safe to say it wasn't cut for being too similar to something else. There are currently no vertical scrolling stages in Ultimate unless you count the brief segment on Rainbow Cruise, so that to me points to it being the main reason it was cut. Whether it's because it breaks the new stage morph feature or just simply that vertical scrolling stages aren't fun, it seems pretty logical that it's the reason it didn't make it to Ultimate. As for how much I want it back, while I would hate playing on it, it is unique enough and also has a different look from Summit, meaning its Omega form would be different as well. For that, I'll let it sneak into B tier. It's a low B, but I think it's fair to put it there. But now it's time for possibly the most infamous cut stage, Poke Floats. This is one of the absolute weirdest stages in the series, as it's really not based on anything at all. The players just fight on top of a bunch of random floating Pokemon in the sky for seemingly no reason. That weirdness though has made it a fan favorite, as it's kind of hard to forget the empty stare of Wooper looming over you. The Pokemon used on the stage are Squirtle, Onix, Psyduck, Chikorita, Weezing, Slowpoke, Porygon, Wooper, Sudowoodo, Snorlax, Venusaur, Seal, Wobbuffet, Unknown, Goldeen, Lickitung, Chansey, and Geodude. This list feels super random too. Sure, there are some fan favorites like Squirtle, but then you get others like Seal, which are far from the top in terms of popularity. That helps this stage's bizarre nature though, and I honestly kind of love it. But that all brings us to the question, why isn't it an Ultimate? I don't know. Yeah, this is our first stage to really have no explanation as to why it didn't make a comeback. I would have loved to see this stage in HD, and I'm also really curious to see what they would have done for its Omega and Battlefield forms. I think this is our first stage to reach the S tier on my want list. It has no clear reason to be cut, and is a really fun and unique stage. Really hope we get to see this one in the next Smash game. But that brings us to our final Melee stage, Flat Zone. This is literally just Flat Zone X but with less transformations, so yeah, it was cut for being pointless. Easy F tier. Wow, that one was fast. Ah, what the heck, let's do some more bonus ones. Instead of one stage though, we got 3 that are all very similar, those being Goomba, Entei, and Majora's Mask. These 3 are all exclusive to the game's event mode and are known as Trophy Tussles. That's because these stages are literally just bigger versions of the respective characters' trophies. I honestly think that's really funny, which makes these stages pretty memorable despite not actually being in versus mode. I can't really bring myself to put them in A tier with Metacrystal since that's an actually well-designed stage, but these are silly enough to make it into B tier. I highly doubt they'll ever come back, they're definitely the least likely stages I'm talking about today, but I like them so I thought I'd bring them up. On to Brawl now. Despite its larger selection of stages than Melee, only 3 of them ended up missing out on Ultimate. The first of the 3 is Rumble Falls from the Donkey Kong series. This is based on Donkey Kong Jungle Beat and is another vertical auto-scroller. Yippee. This one has even more obstacles than Icicle Mountain, meaning this stage is even worse. It's got ladders that can somewhat help with the climbing, but I don't think that's enough to make up for just how awful it is to play on. Like I said with Icicle Mountain earlier, this one was likely killed because of its vertical scroll. Considering these are the only 2 Smash stages like this in the series, and neither of them are in Ultimate, I think it's fair to point to that as the reason. As for the tier list, I'm gonna have to put this in C tier. Unlike Icicle Mountain, the Omega and Battlefield variants for this don't really seem like they'd be that interesting since we have so many other Donkey Kong stages already, which is why this one scores lower on the list. This next stage is funnily enough the only stage in the entire series to be in more than one Smash game, but not in Ultimate. Every other one we have talked about so far got cut after its debut. This one was lucky enough to be in both Brawl and Smash for 3DS. That stage is Flat Zone 2. It's just Flat Zone X with less features again, F tier. Alright, well, we still got one more Brawl stage, and that is PictoChat. It's just PictoChat 2 with less features, F tier. Okay, does Brawl have any bonus stages to talk about? No, not really? Cool, guess we can move on then. We're going to cover Smash for 3DS and Smash for Wii U separately, as the stages cut from each of these didn't appear at all in the opposite version. Smash for 3DS has 3 cut stages, though we already talked about Flat Zone 2, so we only have 2 more to cover. The first of them is Rainbow Road. This is based on Rainbow Road from the Mario Kart series, and since it's easily the most iconic track type from it, it makes perfect sense to come over as a Smash stage. This is specifically taken from Mario Kart 7's Rainbow Road 2, which just so happens to be probably the most popular Rainbow Road ever made. This acts just like the other traveling racing stages we mentioned before, as a floating platform occasionally swoops down to pick up players and move them down the track. Shy Guys are of course racing on it as well, making this a pretty great stage to play on. Add on the beautiful rainbow aesthetic, which makes it gorgeous, and the fact that this is one of the most iconic locations in gaming history, and we have ourselves a pretty perfect Smash stage. So why on earth was it cut? Seriously, I genuinely have no idea why they would ever cut this stage. There is nothing else like it in the game and everyone loved playing on it. You can't even claim it's weird like Poke Floats. This legitimately makes sense to be here. So yeah, I think it goes without saying, easy S tier. You're gonna tell me a game with 4 different Rainbow Road songs completely cut the Rainbow Road stage with no explanation? Yeah, that's a bit absurd. This is a must-have for the next game. Okay, let's hope our next stage here isn't as annoying of a cut. The final Smash for 3DS stage to not make it into Ultimate is Pac-Maze. Nope, this one is still very annoying. Okay, let's run through the stage first. This is based on the very iconic maze from the Pac-Man arcade game. Now, I know some of you may be thinking that this sounds terrible because of the horrific stage that is 75M, also being from an arcade game, but no, Pac-Maze was legitimately very good. It wasn't a direct rip from the game either. The platform layout is unique to make the fight more fun. During the fight, the Pac-Man ghost would be able to spawn in to hurt players. However, you would also be able to pick up power pellets, which would not only let you defeat the ghost, but also get a general attack boost. Add on the really fun aesthetic, and we have a stage that I'm personally a really big fan of. So why was it cut? Well, sadly, unlike Rainbow Road, there is actually a reason that this didn't return, though that's not to say it's a good one. When you pick up a power pellet here, the ghost will turn blue just like in the original Pac-Man. However, they only appear that way on the screen of the player who picked up the pellet. The ghost would appear normally on everyone else's screen, and since the only way to play multiplayer would have been to connect multiple 3DSs, this gimmick worked perfectly. However, since people can obviously play on the same screen for Ultimate, this gimmick wouldn't really work, so that's the likely reason it was removed. But they definitely could have worked around this. The player already flashes when they have a power pellet on the 3DS version, so just keep that and let the ghost be their normal color in local multiplayer. If people are playing on other Switches, then the ghost can be blue. This is a really frustrating one because it feels like they didn't even try to work around this at all. We don't need this stage to be 100% accurate. They already proved that with the layout not being a direct rip from the game. So yeah, this is another S tier. I think there's a decent chance this comes back later down the line, but it's just annoying that it isn't in Ultimate for a super small issue. That brings us to our final Smash game, Smash for Wii U. Despite Ultimate being heavily based off of this entry, this has a pretty large 5 cut stages. To be fair though, most of these do have better reasoning behind them than the 3DS stages did. That's pretty evident in our first stage being Jungle Hijinks. This is based on Donkey Kong Country Returns and features the very unique gimmick of being able to fight in the background of the stage. During the fights, cannons will appear that will let you enter into the background, and since this is the only stage like this in the entire series, it makes playing here a lot of fun. What makes the stage so special though, also happens to be the very reason it's cut. While I'm sure they could have absolutely gotten the background gimmick to work in normal versus matches, Ultimate added a brand new mode known as Stage Morph. This will have the stage you're currently fighting on transform into another stage mid-fight. Since this is the only stage to feature anything in the background to stand on, this would absolutely not work with the new mode at all. While that is certainly a somewhat understandable reason, I do think there is definitely a solution. Just disable the stage from the mode. Yeah, it'd be the only stage that's disabled, but it'd be better than not having it at all. I'd place the stage in A tier for being one that's pretty fun to play on every now and again. It's not quite as iconic as the stages in S tier, though I would certainly still be happy to see it return. Pyrospheres cut stage number 2, and I'm gonna be honest, I completely forgot about it before making this video. This is from the Metroid series and is a big flat platform with 2 extra platforms over each edge. The layout is super basic, sure, but that's because it had to make room for its stage boss, Ridley. Yeah, Ridley is playable now, so the stage has no reason to exist. It still looks kinda cool, and if they wanted to, they definitely could have added it without Ridley, but I also feel like that sort of defeats the purpose of the stage. I don't really think too many people are that heartbroken over this not making a comeback. I'll put it in C tier though, it's at least got a somewhat unique layout and aesthetic which could be used to justify a return. Woolly World might just be the single weirdest cut stage out of all of them. Really, it's only competing with Rainbow Road for that title. This is of course based on Yoshi's Woolly World and features a long wool platform along with 4 cloud platforms and 1 rocket platform. Occasionally during the fight, the main floor at the bottom will go away, forcing the players to fight each other on the floating platforms in the meantime. While that gimmick gimmick may be sort of annoying to some, I think it worked well enough to still be fun. The look of this stage is fantastic as well, as it's totally unique from anything else and it's just a joy to look at. So with that said, why was it cut? Well, I genuinely have no idea. Like I said, it's unique from any other stage, including other Yoshi stages, since this is of course focused on yarn. The gimmick doesn't seem to be that problematic. In fact, it seems quite simple compared to some of the other Ultimate stages. Since this was on the Wii U version too, I'd imagine it'd be much easier to translate to Ultimate than Rainbow Road, which was a 3DS exclusive. If there's something I missed, let me know, but this seems to have no logical reason behind its removal. I'll put it as a high A tier. I don't really need it back as much as the S tier ones, but the aesthetic is really nice, so I'd love for it to come back. Orbital Gate Assault may just be the biggest stage in Smash history. This is based on Star Fox Assault and takes place during a massive space battle. The stage starts on the Grand Fox like Sector Z and Corneria we mentioned before, however this time, it's facing right. Mind-blowing, I know. As the battle continues, you're forced to fight on several different objects like missiles, R-Wings, and more. Sadly, this does make the stage kind of annoying to fight on, but it is certainly cool to look at, and the effort that went into making this stage is certainly admirable. According to Sakurai himself, this stage took an entire year to develop, which is kinda crazy. That fact though is also probably the reason the stage didn't come back for Ultimate. Yeah, it wouldn't take as long to port it over making it from scratch, but it would still take a ton of time. Add on that most people didn't even like playing on the stage anyway, and you just end up with a stage that seems totally unworth the effort. I pretty much agree with that sentiment. I'd rather them focus on making a new stage rather than porting this one, but I guess I'll be okay with it if it does come back. I'll give this a solid B tier. I'd probably not play on it if it were added, but it'd be pretty to look at. Now it's time for our final stage, the only DLC stage from Smash 4 to not make it to Ultimate. That stage is Miiverse. This was basically just a Battlefield clone, but with the white and green color scheme of Miiverse. I honestly do really like how this stage looks. Guess I'm just a fan of simplistic art styles. The layout isn't the selling point of this stage though. This actually worked with Miiverse and it made it to where you can actually see Miiverse posts relating to the characters you're playing on in the background. Looking at this artwork was a lot of yeah, so the Smash fanbase is made up of a bunch of losers, so it was kind of impossible to go without seeing a post that wasn't family friendly. Miiverse is also obviously not present on the Switch, so it's not like they would have had any posts to put behind the fighters anyway. I mean, I guess they could have let it work with Smash's shared content. Mr. B! So yeah, the lack of Miiverse and the complete degeneracy of the Smash fanbase is what killed this stage. I do still really like the aesthetic behind it though, and the idea is fun in practice, so I'd be lying if I said I didn't want this back. I'm putting this in A tier, not very high since the layout isn't special, but the idea is still pretty great. It's never gonna come back though. I think this is definitely a train wreck and Nintendo will avoid it like the plague. But at least it was funny. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you cry yourself to sleep because you can't play on Flat Zone 2 anymore? Let me know in the comments. I'm having a lot of fun with this Cut Things series, and it looks like you all enjoyed the last episode of Mario Kart 2. I've got a few other ideas like cut moves or costumes for Smash, but if you all have any other great ideas for other games, feel free to let me know. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.